Welcome to the Residence Podcast. This is our first one, so you guys are gonna have to survive this with us. My name is Jonathan Eubanks. I'm a resident in counseling here at Sittingwell Counseling in Litchfield, Virginia. Emma, you want to introduce yourself?
And I am Emily Stewart. I'm also a resident in counseling here at Sittingwell Counseling.
My name is Jordan Wright. I am also a resident at Sittingwell Counseling here in Virginia, just like the rest of us.
Yeah, hence the name, obviously. Um, so I wanted to start off with talking about like kind of what qualifies us to talk about this, and maybe share some populations we've kind of worked with. I can start. Let's see. I graduated in this past May, so I've been working here for over about a year and a half now. So I've been working here for a while. But I just graduated my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling in May. I primarily I do a lot of groups and addiction recovery, as you guys know. But I also see individual clients. I've seen couples for premarital and couples counseling, individual clients dealing with anxiety, depression, social anxiety. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of covers what I work with. However, maybe Jordan, do you want to share? Yeah.
Yeah. So I started at Sittingwell in January as an intern, and I graduated this past August and continued with my residency at Sittingwell. I see veterans with PTSD, substance abuse, and childhood trauma. And then I also see a wide range of other types of clients, such as adults with depression, anxiety, and things like that. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also graduated from my program in August. Before that, I started with Sittingwell back last August for my practicum and internship, and have been in residency since about September, officially. I work with kind of a variety of clients. So I work with kids typically with behavioral concerns or anxiety of some kind. And then I work with a good amount of adults who either have been diagnosed with autism or with ADHD, are probably my most common adult clients. Yeah.
It's kind of cool to see the different populations that we've all worked with. Definitely between the three of us, kind of hit a majority of different things that clients may present with. And I think between the three of us, that can give us good insight just for each other to learn about each other's experiences and uh, also just how we can help a broader variety of clients. So our kind of goal today was to discuss some of the myths about counseling because traditionally, there's been a lot of stigma towards counseling or towards seeking counseling. We're just trying to debunk some of these maybe preconceived notions of what counseling looks like, because that can be a big barrier for people to seek counseling. I know Emily has a list. Um, yeah, I'd love just to, we can start off with the first one and just go from there.
Yeah. So our first counseling myth is that counseling is only for people with serious problems. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
my first thought with that is like, what dictates a serious problem, you know? Um, I think you kind of run into that issue. I don't know if you guys have with trauma as well, of people being like, well, I've been through trauma, but it's not trauma. Like it's not the same. It's not the same level. Um, I would kind of argue that a problem is a problem. If it impacts you, impacts your day-to-day life is a problem. There's no such thing as like a serious versus non-serious problem. It's just kind of the impact that it has on you. But it's good for yes.
Yeah. I wonder sometimes with clients where that idea comes from. And I think sometimes it comes from clients trying to have a very compassionate view of other people. And so they qualify their own serious against the idea of, well, somebody else out there has it worse. On the other side of that, it may also stem from just the stigma of trauma and what that might mean about you, which could be a really interesting topic to get into sometime.
Yeah.
And then, going back again to that stigma of what it means to need counseling or want to go to counseling. So I find that those are kind of the two areas that idea maybe comes out of a lot of times. But
Jordan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think a lot of times clients come in with this issue, and then as they continue on counseling, there's other things that pop up that are maybe exacerbating the issue. So I know that we've all worked with clients who come in with an issue, and then there's something else that comes up that's they feel is just as equally as important as the original problem that they came in with. And there's things that happen in clients' lives outside of counseling. The problems don't stop, with the problem that they first came in with. So I think having an outsider kind of help guide through maybe different life transitions, things that feel really stressful, but maybe aren't deemed as, this one big serious problem, are also really important to consider when you're dealing with maybe one important issue that you kind of came in with in the beginning. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. I love what Emily said of this idea of it comes from a place of compassion, of trying to minimize your own problems because you think of like, well, this person has it worse or somebody else has it worse. That's kind of diminishing the impact that certain situations might have on your life. I would say as I was kind of thinking about this from like a counselor perspective, I think about issues that are detrimental to like your relationships with others, maybe your job, just daily functioning, right? That's kind of how I conceptualize a problem. And that can be something very, very small. It's like, oh, I struggle to sleep, and that's making it harder to go to work because I'm so exhausted. That's inhibiting the amount of time I can spend with others. Like, and some people might conceptualize that as like a small issue, but it's impacting a number of areas in your life. So something that should be addressed. And I think counseling is a great place to talk to that at least at that level.
I was just thinking about what Jordan was saying with oh my gosh, now I forgot like what it was specifically that you said. Oh, I hate it when I do that, but that's okay. I think the idea that you were kind of talking about was that people are able to kind of deal with something for a certain amount of time and then it becomes a problem. So that idea of like maybe your max capacity for stress or like distress tolerance. And then when things change and you kind of meet that capacity, then needing help, but feeling like, well, I used to be really good at dealing with this and now I'm not. Like, I should still be able to do it. And so also kind of just thinking about the prevalence then of something like cognitive distortions within the general population, the should statements, the minimizing that Jonathan was talking about, that they're not even aware of that they're doing those unhelpful thinking patterns.
Yeah. No, that's good. An analogy I often use with my clients is this idea of like our stress level is like a balloon. And sometimes it's one big event that fills that balloon and eventually like pops it. But oftentimes it's just little things that add up over time. And eventually like our capacity is just, we can't handle it anymore and it pops. And that's when, intervention is needed to try and help learn new coping skills to deal with those issues. It's good. That's real.
Even if too you're not, someone's not coming in for a specific issue, but maybe it's just little things. The significance of coming in to seek guidance from someone who, knows nothing about your life.
Yeah.
How important that can be. Because I think oftentimes people will go to like their friends or family to seek out advice, but there's other factors weighing into, their thoughts or opinions because of the relationship they have with you. So it can be really powerful and significant to come in and kind of talk about things with people who, um, you know, don't know anything about you and don't really have a relationship with you yet, um, and things like that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you guys have anything more to say on that first myth, but I think that kind of transitions into another very common myth to talk about, which is the idea that your counselor is going to judge you for things that you share with them. Um, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would say I've seen that, and I don't, from like a counselor's perspective, that like makes me like, like honestly just like sad. Um, I don't know what experiences have like led to that to make an individual feel like their counselor would like judge them. Um, I think about like I don't know. I often make analogies to doctors because I feel like doctors are like the medical equivalent of what trained counselors do at Trada. Um, but I would feel that'd be so detrimental if I was like afraid to tell my doctor that like I don't know I broke my leg because I'd be afraid that they would judge me, and that would severely inhibit my ability to recover and severely inhibit my ability to function going forward. It'd be just so detrimental in the long term. Um, and from the counselor's perspective as well, it's like I I chose to be a counselor because I see the value in counseling, but also I like there's so much value in just being the honor of sitting in the room with people and their stories, and that there's no judgment there, and that there's just unconditional positive regards and talk about Allah, right? It's just that empathy I get to express, and hopefully they can feel. But what are your thoughts, Jordan?
Um, yeah, so every counselor signs up for this job for a reason, right? And usually it's not, or I would hope it's not because, oh, I just want to sit and listen to people's garbage all day and judge them. Um, and um, it's important to remember that it comes out of a position of compassion and caring, and the desire to want to see people feel better. And there's so much um, power in, normalizing things that people maybe feel are a really, really big deal, or you um, feel bad because they're having this issue. And so one of the reasons I became counselors because I really had a passion for making people feel comfortable with who they are, like in the now, and currently, and how they're not alone in whatever they're going through, even if it feels like a really, really, really big problem. And I think it can be very healing for clients to even come to the realization of, I'm not alone, and this is something that a lot of people deal with when things feel really, really big and really hard.
Yeah, and I think just to even normalize but give comfort to anybody listening about this myth, it's a common myth for a reason. You're not alone in worrying about that. But again, comfort that we picked this job for a reason, like both Jonathan and Jordan said. But I wonder if that kind of feeling of fear of judgment comes out of a place, to go back to Jonathan's analogy, to like, you wouldn't feel embarrassed telling your doctor that you broke your leg for fear that they'd judge you. When that's like a broken leg, it's a big deal. It's a broken bone, but the things that people come to counseling with are such kind of intimate, vulnerable things to share that, yeah, like I would feel kind of nervous about sharing that with people that I even know, like people I'm really comfortable with, let alone like somebody that I'm just meeting for the first time. And so I think just to, again, normalize like that feeling, because what you're doing when you come to counseling is engaging in a vulnerable relationship. And that's a really good thing in the sense of making progress in counseling, but it would be very common to feel that way.
As you're kind of describing that, I was thinking about, I always have like a different perspective. I would feel more comfortable telling a counselor who I don't know my like the stuff I'm dealing with is intimate details versus like telling like a friend or somebody that I see all the time, right? Like counselor, you go to the office, you leave, you don't have to talk to them until you're in a session, right? They're not a part of your life in any capacity. And so I think for me at least that eases some anxiety, which obviously I can understand for the people that I'm telling a stranger these things about myself, and it's very it is still a big step to take. I think my perspective is, at least for me personally, it's harder to share that with like people that I am super close with, that I'd be afraid of judging me. For me, at least, um, I don't know. Maybe I'm, maybe it's a different perspective. I wouldn't like be afraid of if my counselor judges me. Not that counselors would, but even if they did, it's a counselor. Because I'm higher, kind of, and they work for me. Don't know. Maybe that's a weird perspective to have. It's just me.
I don't think that it's a weird perspective to have. I think maybe perhaps there are like two camps of people out there, and so there are the people who like it's, or at least maybe before rapport is well and truly ill. With a counselor, it's like a little uncomfortable because you don't know the person. But that could ease the fact that you only have to see them like maybe once a week or once every other week could ease that. Whereas like telling the people, I think kind of like you were talking about, that you know really well, like these deep dark things could also be really hard. And I think maybe that depends on kind of which camp you fall into, but I could definitely see both perspectives of it.
Yeah. I think that leads into like another myth we talked about, like going to see a counselor is like see as weakness, right? Like kind of like, I don't know, in my head, that kind of just segues directly into that. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on like this myth that going to see a counselor eats your weak, or is it a sign of weakness?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I think the first thing that comes into my mind is maybe a question of like, if it's a sign of weakness, like why is it a sign of weakness for you? Like why do you feel weak? Going to a counselor and just reflecting on that in itself, I think can tell you so much about why you feel that way or why you think that, and then going from there.
Yeah, I think for me, I think about even just myself when I am having a hard time with things or struggling to do something. I have a really hard time asking for help because I just like to be very independent, and I'm typically like fairly capable of like being pretty independent with things. And so when I then need help, I would take the perspective that it's not necessarily a weakness because you're actually doing something that is hard to do for a lot of people, which is to get help when you feel like you should be capable of doing it on your own.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the perspective I would take.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always feel great right at the outset to be like, yeah, okay, I do need help with this, and I need to be able to go ask somebody for help. But at the end of the day, it's doing something that's hard and maybe uncomfortable. And I think there can be a lot of growth in doing the things that are a little bit uncomfortable just to know that you can do them.
Yeah. I think something that I often tell clients is getting yourself to sit in a chair in the office is the hardest part. And like the hardest part is just getting there. And so I like the way you articulated that is like, if it feels hard, consider yourself strong for getting yourself to the office and talking and just sharing what you feel you can get out in that moment.
It's, well, and like as I'm thinking about this like logically, if we identify that it's easier to just try and figure things out by yourself and it's harder to ask for help, then why would doing the hard thing be weak? Like that, like logically like connected my brain. I work, as I mentioned, like I work a lot with substance recovery. And one thing we talk about is like addiction is easy. It's easy to keep doing what you've always done. Now, it's very hard to support like certain nations, obviously, just financially, but it's easy to just do what you've always done. It's a lot harder to decide to make a change and to not be content with just being how you always been, but to try to be different. And like that, it takes resilience, and that takes courage, and it takes financial strength. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when we think about concepts like the cycle of avoidance, which maybe we can also go more in depth on sometime, if the idea of seeking counseling makes you feel anxious because you'll be perceived as weak or because people will judge you for seeking counseling, the more you avoid doing the thing that causes you anxiety, the stronger that anxious feeling becomes. And when we're able to, kind of going back to my initial point, doing the thing that makes you anxious actually takes away a lot of the power of that anxiety.
No. And I know that I like to speak from experience a lot, but some of the clients, or a lot of the clients that I've seen, actually a lot of times after their first session, they're like, this went a lot better than I thought it was going to go. And I feel so much better. And some of them are like, wow, I can't wait to come back next week. So hearing that, I think, is really encouraging. And I think even supports the idea that, counseling isn't a sign of weakness, and actually it can become like a gift to yourself if you actually like show up and talk about something.
That's good. I had a myth that I wanted to make sure we talked about today because I feel like it's the biggest one that I can think of, at least. And that's the myth that like counseling is giving advice. That you go to counseling to hear somebody tell you how to live your life. And yeah, just as I throw that out there, what are you guys' initial thoughts?
Well, first off, I spent 4 years in school getting trained to give advice, but yeah, again, I'm reminded of kind of what we talked about earlier, in that it's so important to come in and talk to someone who has never heard your story or doesn't have any background on you, and just can start from in like a new space with you. So I think it goes to show that, we often think of advice coming from like our friends and family, instead of a professional who has training, professional training in how to respond to someone that's experiencing a very unique issue. So I think that is important to remember.
I think when I think about the idea of counseling just being advice, the first thing that comes to mind is all of my professors who, like, in classes would say, like, you're not sitting in the room to give advice. And the second thing that comes to my mind is how many times do people we, like, love and care about give us advice and we're like, nah, I don't want to do that. Not to say that, like, them giving you advice is a bad thing, but I take the perspective that if I just give you advice and I tell you what to do, where is your actual motivation to do the things that I tell you to do? Whereas if I can sit with you and help you understand things like your values and how that's going to relate to your goals and what steps you can take, that we can kind of collaboratively work through together, to identify, then you're going to be far more motivated because it relates to those things that you deeply care about, and that motivation comes from you. And we have tied all of that together. And you're going to be far more likely to see long-term success with that rather than me saying, go do this differently, or don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But exploring with you, like, why you do that. What do you think maybe could serve you better instead of this thing? And if the answer is nothing, then okay.
Yeah.
But maybe you can come up with an idea that you could be willing to try out that is better for you. I think that also helps with making the counseling process very individual rather than very cookie cutter, acting like it'll apply to everybody. But
Yeah, you both brought up really good points. One thing that I was thinking about was how uh, counseling is like, for me at least, is creating an environment where change can happen, right? Kind of foster an environment where a client can make change in their life. And as you're kind of describing like cookie cutter, it made me think of like the person who's experiencing what that person is experiencing, obviously, like the client is going to be the expert in that and what they've been through. So they're going to be the best source of information on what they should do. Now we can provide different perspectives, maybe try and see it from a separate lens, like a fly on the wall, kind of we bring that third person perspective. Um, but at the end of the day, like the number one thing in our ethics code is that autonomy, right? That client autonomy, the client being able to be the one to make that decision and that choice. And so for me, as counseling is just fostering an environment for change, and just a space where a client can make change where they want to, and I can just bring in my um, the expertise that I have to just help them have a fuller picture of what might be going on so they can make the most educated decision possible, really. So,
Yeah, I think one more thing is, as counselors, one of the things that we do is we kind of act like a mirror. So if you're sitting in the room with one of us or your counselor, we're kind of trained to act as like you and help you use yourself to kind of find your own way of doing things or your own version of advice. Because again, I think when you go to a family or a friend, which can be helpful, and sometimes um, they have to give you advice from their own experience, which is something that we do not do. And so we have this way of kind of using the client to find their own advice. And yeah.
well, and I think about all the times where, um, like in my personal life, where I'll share something and somebody gives me advice back when I just want someone to listen to me, someone to feel like I want it to feel understood or heard. And I think that's what counseling can offer is I used to feel understood and heard. Um, Now sometimes being understood and heard looks like, hey, do you hear how you sound this? Maybe your perception's like a little off. What would it look like from this perspective? And so there is that, once the rapport is established, that challenging those, you mentioned cognitive distortions of like, maybe there's something off. Maybe I'm seeing this from a different perspective because we all have very limited perspectives on situations because it can be entirely influenced by our experiences. So coming to counseling looks like having, getting to hear another perception or perspective on the situation, but also just feeling heard and understood, which has so much power in and of itself. So, we don't have a ton of time left. I'm curious if there's any myths that you guys could think of that we need to talk about today. If not,
I do have
okay, bring that up.
because I think, and I've also heard people say this, and so this is why I want to talk about the myth that counseling is always going to be too expensive to get, because that seems to be, from what I've heard people talk about it, one of the biggest reasons people won't go get counseling. And that's not to say that there aren't counselors out there who are expensive. And some counseling can be expensive, especially when you get into like specialized services or things like that. But something I think is really kind of cool about counseling is that we do try to create options. And so, yeah, seeing a fully licensed counselor who also has a doctorate or like multiple doctorates or something crazy, and they've been practicing for like 40 years, maybe they're going to be, you know, pretty expensive. Maybe they're going to be like 150 an hour or like up, and that's expensive. Um, but maybe you know, a counselor who's like freshly got their license, they're gonna be less expensive. And then you get into the idea of residents and interns. And most practices will have ideally residents and some interns. And when you get into that, you have more options. So at our practice, residents out of pocket are like $45 an hour. And we can, through our supervisor, take insurance. We have interns who are like $35 an hour, which is, you know, pretty reasonable as a price to get counseling from people who are constantly working on learning and staying up to date in the field. And, we're working under the supervision of people who maybe are more expensive, who do have a lot of experience to offer and help to offer. And we work very, very closely together. And so I did just want to kind of address that, because if you do want to go get help, there are options out there, and maybe you will need to call a counseling office and say, hey, do you have any interns who are available? What are their prices? Do you have residents? Do you have, this or that? And that's a step that you can take. Even if you don't book an appointment that day, that's still a step that you have taken towards really doing something that, again, can be quite difficult.
Advocate for yourself for sure. There's even some counselors who will do a certain amount of like pro bono sessions a week, just to help the community out. I know there's some counseling offices that try to offer like first services for people in need. So
Yeah.
definitely, if like finances are an issue, like trying to find practices that will work with you as much as they can. So yeah. Any final thoughts, Joe, on that topic?
I would say too, when counselors are in training, there's a certain, well, like throughout my experience at like going through school and getting trained, there is a need that counselors or interns have as far as like how many hours they get. And so I think something that kind of goes like unsaid sometimes too is that, we need to see you too. Your need is bigger than ours, but also remembering that there's hours that counselors in training we need to. And so another reason could be that you're helping further our training and our education, and things like that.
And with that, obviously, there's going to be some flexibility if like affordability is an issue, because interns want to help and learn and just want to be present and help people through their problems, and they're going to be willing to just try to be flexible as much as they possibly can. I wanted to like kind of leave like a challenge as we wrap up for just anybody that sees this. Like, what myths about counseling do you have? What beliefs do you have about counseling that may or may not be true? And just kind of don't be afraid to challenge those thoughts, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you. Don't be content with settling with, I have it all figured out. Be willing to accept maybe there's new information, maybe there's something in this. I think that's something that really everybody can do, is being willing to accept new information and challenge the beliefs that they have. So that's our first one. We're the residents. If you guys ever want more information about us or about Sitting Well Counseling, I believe our website is sittingwellcounseling.com, where you can just search Sitting Well Counseling in Lynchburg, Virginia, and it'll pop on. So I appreciate you guys chatting, and I appreciate anybody that listened. So